Kia ora, my name's Celeste and I'm here along with some others as a representative of West Papua Aotearoa. For those that haven't heard of our group, it's a voluntary organisation that's the Aotearoa grouping is a national network, and we operate on a regional basis, but we also collaborate nationally, and we're a national network who work in support of West Papua, and our focus is human rights advocacy. And also one of the things we've been looking at is stopping the importation of rainforest hardwoods from West Papua and Papua New Guinea into New Zealand, such as Kwila. And I personally got involved with this when I was doing my master's in Otago, and I was looking at New Zealand's aid program in West Papua.
Okay, thanks, Celeste. So we'll do a short presentation here now, which is just more or less an introduction to West Papua and the issues of rainforests and rights there. And then there'll be a Q&A, a question session after that, and then we'll break into groups. So if you have questions, you can put them in the chat, or in the Q&A session, you can just put your hand up in the button in the screen. So firstly, oops, I can't seem to move it. Where is West Papua? It's often confusing where it is because Papua New Guinea is also there. So West Papua is the western half of New Guinea Island, and it's above Australia there, you can see. It's inhabited by hundreds of different tribes for thousands of years, more recently colonized by the Dutch and then handed over to Indonesia in 62, 63, and has broken into two provinces, West Papua and Papua. So, confusing names, but this is the two provinces of West Papua that we'll be talking about. And why is Papua important? Well, firstly, amazing cultural diversity. There's hundreds of different cultures there. The island of New Guinea has a sixth of the world's languages, so 200 in West Papua and 600 in Papua New Guinea. So incredible cultural diversity. And also amazing forests, 33 million hectares of forest, 1.25 times the size of New Zealand in primary forests on this island alone. It has the highest plant diversity of any island in the earth. So amazing, rich natural resources there, but it's under threat. And these forests need to be protected. If they go the same way like Sumatra and Kalimantan, we will not reach we will not stay under 1.5 degrees. This is the importance of them. Indonesia will not meet its emissions reductions commitments. That's how important these forests are for the planet. But these forests are also a curse because of people are running to exploit them. And it's causing a lot of social issues there. So we have routine abuse of human rights in Papua by authorities and others. This instance here was a deaf man, he was beaten up by military police. It went viral on social media. Terrible instances like this happening every day. And yeah, there's just a general struggle for recognition of land and of their rights. The picture on the right is a protest by women around the recognition of their rights by the local and the national government. We have massive loss of livelihoods and culture. The promises of development, such as from palm oil plantations, are not delivered either on education or on health or these sorts of things. So yeah, many of the SDGs are highly relevant here in relation to the forests of Papua. And the second key component that we'll focus on is the forests. As I said, very large areas, 85% still in forest. yeah, amazing expanses still there. They are, of course, under threat from logging, for example, for timber, plywood, furniture, yeah, one of those, most of the timber goes to China, but some of it does come here to New Zealand, such as kwila for decking. And although that is, some of it is what's called FSC certified, so it's got a better control over it, it still has some problems. Also, a lot of deforestation for palm oil plantations. This is a major problem and the biggest cause of forest loss in Papua. And we are connected to that as well. We buy products from palm oil companies who are buying from Papua, from these concessions, including what we call palm kernel expeller, PKE, which is fed to cows, to dairy cows, as part of the intensification of dairying in New Zealand. So this PKE is a big link that we have to palm oil and deforestation in Indonesia. In addition, threats to the forests are roads, infrastructure, and mining. There are plans for more or less doubling the roading network in Papua, and we know from elsewhere the deforestation that comes after roads. So these are looking at some of the links already that we here in Aotearoa have to the forests in Papua. And this is what it looks like. It's shocking when you see deforestation. So going from a primary forest to this is expansion for palm oil, mired in corruption, and in many cases illegalities, driven by corporate greed, companies scrambling. It's like the Wild West because of large areas there remaining. And as I mentioned, all of the human rights abuses and failures that come with that. There's just, you can see what it looks like, the destruction, and then, you can imagine the relevant SDGs here, and the loss of water there, the water that people used to rely on is completely polluted. The food and garden sources destroyed as well, and significantly a massive emission of greenhouse gas emissions. We're in a climate emergency. This cannot happen. These areas need to be conserved if we're going to survive climate change. 23% of global greenhouse gas emissions come from land use, and 40% of that from tropical deforestation. So that's the importance for us, globally, of these forests. As well, deforestation and habitat destruction is linked to diseases such as COVID breaking out. So we need to conserve forests for that reason as well. Moving on, we in Greenpeace, we monitor the deforestation that's happening in Papua, and this is an example in the southeast of Papua, where the top image, this is from a satellite, is from November 2019, and then the bottom one is from February 2021. So you can see the change that's happening. This is just the beginning of deforestation for palm oil. It's only a few hundred hectares at the moment, but this is going on as we speak now. So deforestation is happening, and this is in the Bovendigua district. And while COVID is happening also, when there is much less control and monitoring of activities on the ground by the government and other parties. And the worst and most shocking thing is that these two concessions are linked to a New Zealand investor. The main investor in these concessions is a New Zealander who lives in Auckland. And so this is just terrible that we have a New Zealander linked to this that is going on. And then just putting deforestation in the context of the SDGs, there's two frameworks here that I think are really useful for us to use. One is what's called planetary boundaries, which describes the safe operating space for us on Earth. And it's been done by the Stockholm Resilience Institute. And what we find here, we've breached 4 of these 9 planetary boundaries already, and 3 of them associated with deforestation, 3 of the overshoots here. The second framing is around the social foundations, and this has largely been encapsulated in what we call donut economics. So it's trying to describe all of the social components that we need for a healthy life on Earth. And deforestation is causing the shortfall of 7 out of 12 of those. So deforestation is a major issue with all of the, or more or less all of the SDGs. But there are solutions to deforestation in Papua. And this begins with recognition of customary rights to the forest and land, including mapping their territories. We know from research all over the world that if indigenous rights are recognised, then you have much better outcomes for forests. The forests are largely protected, and the biggest areas of forests that are protected around the world are where indigenous people have rights. Greenpeace has been supporting the tribes in Papua to have their rights recognised, and we have had some successes with that in terms of them getting their lands recognised and kicking palm oil companies off their lands. At the same time, there needs to be support for alternative economies and livelihoods. The people do want to make some income. They want to improve their lives. So in this case, the bottom photo there is about sago production, where sago are a big palm that grow in the swamp forests naturally there, and the local people use them for food. So in this case, they're harvesting them sustainably to extract the sago and turn them and manufacture them into cakes and various other food products and sell them around Indonesia, and we're trying to get them exported as well. So this is just an example of alternative economies. There's a lot of other non-timber forest products as well that can be used from the forest. And we want the companies that are there now in Papua and the ones that are thinking of investing there to invest in these economies rather than economies of deforestation and destruction. We need a change in paradigm for that. So we don't want any expansion of plantations and no new permits there. And we want to extend the current palm oil moratorium that there is in Indonesia. This needs to be done. And also, if companies are already doing no deforestation, you can do development without deforestation, and you can do it well with respect for rights. And there are frameworks such as the high carbon stock approach or high conservation value approach that can help do that. And we need companies and governments to be doing that. So this is some examples of solutions to deforestation in Papua. There is another path. And for us here in Aotearoa, what can we be doing and thinking about doing to support stopping deforestation and to support rights in Papua? Firstly, phase out New Zealand import of palm kernel expalia, PKE, as an animal feed. We don't need this. That's causing intensification or allowing intensification of dairying here in New Zealand, and it's part of the reason why we have polluted waterways in New Zealand. So we can stop that. We don't need that. We need strong government regulation on importing of products that come from logging or deforestation. So this includes timber, and there is a proposal for only restricting on around legality for timber from the government. We need it much broader than that. We have rubber coming in that's come from deforestation. We have cocoa, the chocolate you're eating is coming from deforestation, and many other commodities. So we need regulation on that. We also need to expose and put pressure on the New Zealand government around New Zealand investment links to Papua deforestation. We have these documented now. We need the government to take some action against these investors. It's really terrible for Papua and bringing New Zealand's reputation down. And we would also like the New Zealand government to support the human and indigenous rights issues in Papua, such as raising them with the Indonesian government. So that's the end of the presentation. Thank you for listening. There's some details here on West Papua Aotearoa if you want to be in contact or check the website. We can jump now to the Q&A, and you can either put your questions in the chat or or put your hand up and we can take it from there. So I'll just stop this for now. And once we finish the Q&A, we'll put up a question for the breakout groups, which relates to what we can be doing here locally in Aotearoa.
Grant, someone, Ria, has asked, can you tell us more about the high carbon stock approach?
Okay, thanks, Ria. Yeah, the high carbon stock approach was developed by Greenpeace and a couple of companies and organizations to put in place no deforestation on the ground in the tropics. What happened was a number of companies such as Nestle or Unilever, these brands, made commitments to say, okay, we're not going to buy from deforestation. We're going to stop deforesting areas. But no one knew how to do it. It's not a simple thing in the tropics. And so what we did is we developed a methodology to do that, to put it in place on the ground. And there is a website you can go to, highcarbonstock.org, and you can read about the methodology, but it works. It stops deforestation and is a rights-based approach, so supports Indigenous rights as well. And connected to that is the high conservation value approach as well. Thanks.
Cool, thank you. Amy and Kirsten actually kind of asked similar questions. What has been to date in regards to governments and regulations to stop importing PKE and timber products? And what controls can our government put in place to control New Zealand investors involved in Papua deforestation?
Yeah, thanks for those questions. Currently, there's no controls on importing PKE other than health issues where that has caused a problem with one or two shipments. For example, there was goat parts found in a PKE shipment, and so that was rejected and turned away. So it's more health and safety things that have been restricting PKE. For timber products, there's currently no restrictions, but the government has a proposal for legislation around legality, around legal imports or exports of timber. For us, that doesn't go far enough. It needs to, cover sustainability aspects and in fact cover more than just timber products. The EU, for example, is right now putting in place regulations covering all commodities coming into Europe and looking at anything. They have to prove that they're not associated with deforestation. So, we're way behind where the EU is going. In terms of investors, there's no controls as far as I know. I'm still asking and trying to find out, and maybe other participants here know whether there are any controls on New Zealand investments overseas in terms of, breaching the SDGs or other international law. Thanks.
Perfect. And the next question is, why is there a focus on phasing out PKE rather than finding a more sustainable option than palm oil?
Well, I think the New Zealand farming really, its signature was, grass-fed, animals running around and not associated with the intensification that we have like in Europe or in the US. And the intensification of dairying, for example, is what is causing, the pollution of our waterways with nitrates. It's, doubled the cow numbers in the last 20 years here in New Zealand. And we think this is, and as well as just talking about the emissions that come from that. So we shouldn't be doing that just from an environmental point of view here in New Zealand. But, products like PKE and the use of palm oil, even for biofuel, and for other commodities, is driving deforestation. This is what's driving deforestation. It's the use of commodities. It's not local communities saying, yeah, we want palm oil. It's us, mostly the Western world, but also China and India buying commodities and wanting and driving the deforestation. So we need to reduce, and we think PKE in particular, we don't need it at all. We can phase it out.
Do we have time for 2 more questions or no?
Yes, I think we do. We can have definitely a few more questions.
Okay. So hi Grant. Hang on, I think I've actually missed. Has an online petition for timber products and PKE regulation changes within New Zealand been done amongst Kiwis yet?
In the past, there has been petitions around timber imports and things like that, but at the moment we don't have that, no. And there isn't a petition on PKE either. So that's a good idea, a possibility.
Yes. Yeah. The next question is from Jane. Please, can you tell us what Greenpeace's position is with regards to the issue of self-determination of the West Papuan people?
Yeah, we support the rights of the indigenous rights and the customary rights of people. We don't have a position on self-determination and so forth. So we do a lot of work on the ground with the people to have their rights recognised, their customary rights, and are slowly having success with that. So that's our focus with that.
We've got a question from Keith in regards to mining. Do we mention mining? And the next question is from Charlotte. Kia ora, Grant, I was wondering what your stance was on the fair trade industry is and what would actual fair trade look like beyond the sticker of approval?
Yeah, on mining, yes, mining impacts are huge in Papua. You would have seen, like the massive Freeport mine, for example, and the impact. It's the world's biggest gold mine. And there's proposals for a lot of other mining. More or less half of Papua is covered with mining permits. And so mining is definitely a major concern. And we would like to not see a lot of that move ahead, of course. In terms of fair trade, the investigations we've done with fair trade is that it doesn't guarantee no deforestation either. Unfortunately, it has stronger social requirements, but its requirements around deforestation, for example, on cocoa from Africa, has not prevented deforestation being linked to fair trade products. So we have been in discussion with fair trade, and they are strengthening their standards on that. But I think all of the labels and the brands, you have to look a bit more deeper around that, and they're not often what they say they are. I mean, fair trade is one of the better ones. It's more inclusive and has a better model. But all of the labels are not perfect. So we really need to be very careful with what we think we're buying, and really, I mean, the key thing is just to buy less. We need to reduce our consumption. Consumption is killing us on the planet. So that's something for us to think about.
Perfect. This may be the last question. It's from Joy. How does the government MFAT consider human rights when supporting a project / business interest development aid in West Papua?
Yeah, I can't really answer that, what the criteria are for New Zealand development aid. I'm not aware of it, unless there's someone on the list and a participant here who knows that. In the past, there haven't been strong criteria around impacts, environmental impacts sometimes. So some New Zealand aid plantations have, for example, have had impacts. New Zealand has been supporting plantations development in different places in the past. I think New Zealand aid is much more focused on education and governance issues, and I'm sure they would be cognizant of rights now, but I'd need someone else to answer that.
Perfect. I think that might be the last question, Grant. Are we all good to move into the breakout rooms?
Yes, that's great. Thanks for the questions. Excellent questions. And so this is the question we proposed for the breakout groups. And so how can we here in Aotearoa take local action to support local community rights and stop deforestation in Papua? So, I talked about the possible actions or the sort of themes of actions that might be able to take them, but I think, we don't have any specific actions that are being taken on those yet. So I think, that's the proposal for the discussion, the group discussion. The groups will be for 20 minutes. We'll need, within the group, we'll need people just to volunteer to facilitate and to take to be able to report back. We'll be using a Jamboard. So there's a link in the chat there. If you click on that link, it'll take you to what's a Jamboard, which is like a sticky note board where each group can basically paste their ideas, and you'll see that by group number, you'll have a number for each of the page in the Jamboard. So and then after the breakout group's finished, after your brainstorm and you've clarified your ideas, we want you to come back with the 5 best ideas you have, and we'll do a report back for the last 10 or 15 minutes.
Okay, Grant, I'm going to open the breakout rooms.
Thank you.
Okay. Is there anything further to add from group 1? Okay, I'm going to move on to group 2.
So one of the things we were looking at was using of social media. So looking at like hashtags such as Papuan Lives Matter, sort of showing that there's quite similar issues happening in a different part of the world, and sort of along the lines of the Black Lives Matter movement in terms of spreading awareness that way, and encouraging people to buy fair trade or palm oil free products through like sort of communication and marketing options, but also in terms of providing only those options. So phasing out, similar to the PKE or to the unsustainable timber, just not having those options available to buy, because when people don't have the option to buy the unsustainable products, they're just forced into buying the best things for the environment without really thinking about it too much. So you're encouraging people to look more locally for their consumption of goods, and then also trying to connect into different community groups in New Zealand that have a focus on the specific issues, because like connecting with other people is always going to be more effective than just to trying to pursue things on an individual basis.
Great. Awesome. Shall we move to group 3? There was a few technical issues, so I said I'd read this out for group 3. So one of the things that came up was naming and shaming New Zealanders harvesting the forests in Papua. A second point was, from a consumer perspective, finding an alternative to PKE, and looking at the links to intensive dairy farming and why we're relying on PKE in the first place. A third point was the sources of kwila, making sure that we're only sourcing kwila that is harvested sustainably and has certifications. And there's obviously gaps in the current system because Trade Me is still stocking kwila that doesn't have the right certifications. A follow-up action would be to contact architects and other consumer groups to make sure that they're following whatever regulations we have. And then the final point we had was raising more public awareness on the issues in Papua and how it might affect people in New Zealand and what things we can do to help. Okay, I'm going to move to Jamboard 4.
Well, I can do it. I'm Raya. And we had lots of kind of discussion around a few points. I think probably a key thing that we all kind of agreed about is the value of using petitions to not just for influencing, but also to inform and educate, through social media. Then we talked quite a bit about PKE, and there was kind of the stuff around the PKE isn't the key issue is really about stopping palm oil plantations and putting out more information about products that don't have palm oil, what products consumers can swap out so that they can access products that are palm oil free, or where palm oil is sourced from, because PK isn't the point, it's the palm oil plantations that are the issue. And then we talked a bit about the issue around the human rights and self-determination for West Papuan peoples. And Andrew, did you want to speak a bit more about this? Because we just sort of got it started on this conversation when time ran out. Andrew, Jane?
Yeah, just to say, this wasn't directed exclusively at Greenpeace. I hope that it's, I think a lot of people find it hard to take on the political issues in West Papua, and it is a challenge, because if you're going to work in West Papua, the Indonesian government will stop you if you do raise the issue of the political processes and the principle of self-determination. So it's more trying to make the link between what we're talking about here, which is, you know, sustainability and you know, saving the rainforest, etc., with the political realities on the ground in West Papua. And most West Papuans will feel that they need that their rights can only be respected when the political process is improved.
That's great. Thank you for your contribution. And is there anything else from group 4 that you want to add before? No, great. And then we've got group 5.
Sure, I can take that.
Great, thank you.
So we kind of bounced around a few different topics, which is why we color coded. But the main kind of area we talked about a lot in yellow was we talked a lot about education and raising awareness. Those were kind of the key words that we kept coming up with. Because there's lots of things I know was mentioned earlier with group 2 about, for example, like social media campaigns. And we also talked about educating children and younger generations on sustainable import. You know, obviously importation and stuff like that's a very complicated issue, but if it starts to become something that's discussed in kind of school topics or brought into kind of family environments, then as we know, children tend to kind of pass on that information to parents and adults and kind of spread it through the community. And then we also talked a lot about, because we mentioned about government organizations who are already working on carbon neutral things, and how if you can kind of bring things like issues with specifically with Papua into government organizations that are already working on carbon neutral and sustainable imports, then it can kind of be rolled into bigger mandates that are already happening. And then the kind of action point we kind of finished up on was basically encouraging ceasing the use of like non-sustainable, should probably say, PK imports, and then raising awareness amongst Kiwis as to why that's important. Because the action in and of itself is important, but the more public awareness we generate, the greater kind of rolling impact we will see from that.
Thank you. Okay, move over to group 6. Does anyone from group 6 want to report back?
Yeah, hi. Yeah, we spoke with Joe, Shirley, Rosa, Kat, and Grant, and we talked a lot about how we need to like decolonize this place as well as West Papua, and like integrating these ways and practices that we're trying to do here, not just in New Zealand, but in West Papua as well, because we have to have like a major shift in the way that we're currently doing farming, like, well, getting rid of our forests to farm, which is just ridiculous. So yeah, we talked a lot about that. We talked about awareness as well, and consumption, and that was probably, if anyone else in my group wants to add anything, that's cool.
Yeah, it was quite interesting because we were talking about how, like, we can be very hypocritical saying, oh, they shouldn't do this and they shouldn't do that. But the fact that New Zealand, we've already deforested it, and now we're making a lot of money from agriculture on our land, which is quite unsustainable the way we're doing it, polluting our own land. So it's almost like we need to sort out our own backyard as well. And education, awareness, all that thing is super important, but actually we need to look at what we're doing here, because how can we be telling them what to do when we're not leading a good example, when we're doing the opposite, and then we say don't do this, but actually the fact New Zealand's a very wealthy country because of what we've done. So it's quite important for us to, And it was interesting too to learn that a lot of the farmers are tied by banks, and it's the banks, making them unable to, destock and all this sort of stuff, because they're sort of setting the limits or setting the boundaries for them. So it seems to, if we can put pressure on the banks to make sure that they're enabling the farmers to be able to be more self-sustainable, really, which was something I learned.
It's really great. Is anything else from group 6?
Just the thing I mentioned about I'm in touch with Pacific Women through Graduate Women, and asking them what they think and getting them involved rather than us sort of imposing our views, which of course do seem very good views. So just to go to the people themselves.
Cool. Thanks, group 6. Okay, I'm going to move on to, is there a group 7? No, doesn't look like it. Was there a group 7? Anyone from group 7 out there?
No, there was only 6 rooms.
6.
Yep.
Okay,
Yep.
Great. So that's all the groups. So what we'll do is we'll just do a quick wrap up. And I think Sam and Grant are going to just come in here.
I think we overall, just listening to all the groups, we've got a common grounds in terms of actually supporting the existing NGOs and movements that are already available for people if you are interested. So such as West Papua Aotearoa or the UN Association. So depending on where you are based, we have UN Association based in majority of the cities. So those are kind of the groups that you could get involved as well as the other movements. Currently, there is a hashtag Papuan Lives Matter that is available on your Twitter and other social media. Obviously, it's not trending, but that's something I think a lot of us and the young generations can definitely put an impact on, especially if we are comparing against Black Lives Matter as well. And as consumers being, I guess, conscious about what we're buying, so swapping out with the products that are palm oil free, and just being aware in general about the consumptions and perhaps supporting fair trade options as well. We heard a lot about raising awareness. Without raising awareness, we can't really do anything. So I heard a lot of education, and educating children and the younger generations and telling them why it is actually important. And New Zealand as a whole leading by examples, because we can't be telling others what to do if we are not practicing ourselves. So yeah, I think those are the kind of the main points: spreading awareness, educating people, actually practicing as a consumers to be conscious buyers, and obviously spreading awareness on your social media and to media, because yes, same things kind of go on in West Papua, but no one really knows about it. And if you are interested, join West Papua Aotearoa and UN Association across the country, depending on where you're based.
Thanks, Sam.
Yeah, thanks, Sam. Yeah, I think just to add a little bit more, I mean, thank you so much for everyone for their thoughts and really, taking the time to, to think about what we can do here. I mean, for me, some of the new elements, I think, is really, you're thinking about the finance and the investment side of things. The investor's name is Neville Mahon. I really think, that we can do a lot in that area. It's really a neglected area. So it's really good to hear thoughts around that. And yeah, to really reflect on ourselves, we need to transform here in Aotearoa first before we really, can push others too. So putting those two things together, support Papua, but also transform ourselves as well. So those couple of things I really took away from this as well. So thanks everyone for that.
And I'll just add that as I mentioned at the start, we operate as a solidarity group across the country, and there are other groups as well that are working in sort of overlapping spaces. So West Papua Action Aotearoa is the grouping of different regions that are working on West Papuan issues, and I'm part of the West Papua Canterbury group. There's another number of ways we can connect, which include Facebook. So there's a West Papua Action Aotearoa, West Papua Action Canterbury, and other groups across the country which have Facebook pages, plus Students for West Papua Facebook. There's a website, and there's Twitter and Instagram. So their links are on the final slide. And yeah, feel free to sort of follow those pages for further information, or to get in touch with any of the facilitators, and we can give you more information if you have any further thoughts for follow-up.
Thanks everyone. I think we're done. And yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you. Great session. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.
Yeah. Kia ora.
Thank you.